May 10th, 1940. Brussels, Belgium. The morning sun pierces through thick clouds of smoke rising from the horizon. Explosions shake the earth beneath. The smell of burning oil and steel fills the air. The distant sound of German engines hums louder and louder. Nazi forces, having already swept through the Low Countries, are advancing relentlessly toward France. The streets, once bustling with life, are now silent as families huddle in basements, staring blankly at radios, waiting for orders. On the ground, confusion reigns. The German blitzkrieg has shattered the French defenses, overwhelming everything in its path. Tanks, armored infantry, and Luftwaffe bombers move in perfect coordination, crushing resistance in record time. Within just a few days, France's once mighty defense lines will be obliterated. It seems like only a matter of time before Britain is next. But, as the smoke clears, something unexpected begins to unfold. Thousands of feet above this chaos, in the skies above the English Channel, another battle is raging, one that will decide the fate of Britain. The RAF's pilots, barely out of their teenage years, scramble into their Spitfires and Hurricanes, staring down the approaching wave of Luftwaffe bombers. Their task seems impossible. Halt the relentless advance of Nazi Germany in its tracks. It's a fight against time, against overwhelming odds. On this day, May 10th, 1940, the fate of the world shifts, though the men on the ground and in the air do not yet know the extent of it. In a few months, Britain will stand on the brink of collapse, its future hanging by a thread. And yet, despite all odds, they will survive. July 10th, 1940, 15,000 feet over the English Channel. The roar of the Merlin engines drowns out all but the howling wind rushing past the cockpit. Squadron leader Geoffrey Wellings tightens his grip on the control stick, his knuckles white. He and his squadron have just been scrambled. The skies above England are packed with formations of German bombers, their bulky frames cutting through the clouds like predatory birds hunting their prey. Behind them, their Luftwaffe escorts, sleek and deadly Messerschmitt Bf 109s, form tight formations, ready to strike. In front of them, the Spitfires of the Royal Air Force, RAF, are flying to meet them. The Battle of Britain has officially begun. It's the beginning of the Luftwaffe's greatest offensive yet, a bid to break the British spirit and pave the way for a German invasion. The air feels dense, almost suffocating, with the tension of imminent violence. Wellings watches as the first bombers appear in the distance, silhouetted against the pale sky. His heartbeat quickens as the radar picks up more targets. Waves of bombers, each one a testament to German military might. Their mission: protect Britain's skies, hold back the German onslaught, and buy time for reinforcements. Their odds of survival? Slim. At least 20% of RAF pilots would not return from these skies. It is a battle where every second counts, and one mistake could mean death. Suddenly, the radio crackles to life. Engage the enemy. All squadrons, engage. Wellings pushes his Spitfire into a steep dive, the G-forces pressing him into his seat as he moves in on the first bomber formation. The unmistakable whine of a Messerschmitt fills his ears, and a streak of gunfire cuts past his wing. He banks hard to the left. His mind is racing, his pulse pounding in his ears. It's only been moments, but already the tide of war has begun to turn, not on the ground, but in the air. Above the Channel, a fierce dogfight has erupted, one that will determine Britain's fate. July 11th, 1940, 22,000 feet over southern England. The sun glints off the silver wings of a German Junkers Ju-87 Stuka dive bomber as it hurtles toward its target. Below, the rolling fields of England, peaceful only a few hours ago, now lay in the shadow of war. A pair of Spitfires roar by, weaving through the chaos of the sky as they chase the German aircraft. The roar of their engines, accompanied by the distinctive crackle of machine gun fire, fills the air. This is the dawn of what would come to be known as the Battle of Britain. From this moment forward, every day would bring new waves of attacks, and every hour would be a fight for survival. At this very moment, over southern England, the RAF pilots are engaged in a desperate attempt to stop the German bombers from inflicting massive damage to the country's infrastructure. Flight Lieutenant David Lord, an experienced pilot, watches the dive bombers coming in with terrifying precision. His heart races as he dips his Spitfire's nose downward, lining up his shot. He can feel the cold sweat on his brow, the tension in his muscles. He squeezes the trigger, and a stream of tracer rounds slices through the air, striking the bomber's engine. It starts to burn, its descent swift and fiery as it crashes to the ground below. For a brief moment, there is silence in the cockpit, the roar of the engines fading as the tension lifts. But then, the radio crackles again with a report. More bombers inbound, more fighters incoming. The fight is far from over. The Luftwaffe's strategy is clear. Destroy Britain's air defenses, overwhelm the RAF, and establish control of the skies. Their goal is to neutralize the Royal Air Force, leaving Britain vulnerable to a ground invasion. But what the German High Command doesn't realize is that the RAF's resolve is unlike anything they've encountered before. Every downed bomber, every lost pilot, only strengthens the British resolve. As the days wear on, the Luftwaffe's bombers are met with a wall of defiance in the air. For every plane the RAF loses, they shoot down another. British pilots, some of whom had only learned to fly mere months ago, display extraordinary bravery and skill. The war in the skies is just beginning, but already the first cracks are appearing in the German advance. The Luftwaffe, for all their might, are discovering that defeating Britain will not be as easy as they had hoped. August 15th, 1940, 18,000 feet above the Channel. The sky is a swirling mass of gunfire and smoke. In the cockpit of his Spitfire, Pilot Officer John Jack Allen feels every nerve in his body tense. Below him, the rolling waves of the Channel glisten eerily, an indifferent witness to the battle raging above. The temperature is freezing at altitude, his breath visible through the open visor of his helmet. He's been flying for hours now, the monotony broken only by the sharp explosions around him, each one sending another spray of debris across his path. The Luftwaffe's offensive has reached its peak. The Battle of Britain is entering its most desperate phase. The Germans, having already launched wave after wave of attacks, are now focused on one target: the RAF airfields and radar stations that are the heart of Britain's defense network. If they can destroy these critical assets, Britain will be unable to defend itself, and an invasion will be inevitable. But the RAF, despite being vastly outnumbered, has other plans. They fight on, determined to stop the Luftwaffe at all costs. Allen watches as a group of Messerschmitt Bf 109s break through the cloud cover, their sleek forms darting through the sky. A formation of bombers follows closely behind them, their heavy load of high explosives glinting in the sun. The radar stations on the coast have been the Germans' primary target for days now, and Allen knows what's at stake. With his squadron leader's voice crackling through his headset, "Engage the 109s, take them down." Allen grips the control stick tighter. His heart beats faster as he dives toward the enemy, the air raking his face as the Spitfire picks up speed. There is no time to think. Every movement must be precise, every shot deadly. The Germans seem to have the upper hand in numbers, but they don't have the advantage of heart. As the British pilots engage in another intense dogfight, Allen sees one of the bombers lining up to drop its payload on a nearby airfield. In that instant, the stakes are clear. Stop the bombers, or see the airfield fall. Allen pulls the trigger, and a burst of tracer rounds rips through the sky, striking the bomber's engine. The plane spirals out of control, flames licking the tail as it plummets toward the earth. But there's no time for relief. The fight rages on. As the battle intensifies, the Luftwaffe continues to press on. But with each passing day, it becomes clear that the RAF's resistance is growing stronger. The Germans, for all their skill and firepower, are facing a force that refuses to yield. August 18th, 1940, 14,000 feet over southern England. The wind bites sharply, cutting through the fabric of the cockpit like a blade. Flight Lieutenant Robert "Bobby" Marshall's eyes dart across the sky, scanning for movement. His mind is a blur of tactics, memories of his training, and the faces of the men who had fallen beside him. It has been a week since the Luftwaffe launched its all-out assault on the RAF's defenses. The skies are a constant battleground, and Marshall's squadron has already faced more than its fair share of dogfights. The sound of distant engines rumbles like thunder in the air. Marshall looks to his left and spots the approaching formation of German bombers. Ju-88s, their long wings cutting through the clouds. They're low enough that Marshall can see the crew through the glass of their cockpits. These bombers, like the others before them, are on a mission to destroy an airfield. They're part of the German strategy to break Britain's backbone by eliminating its air infrastructure, hoping to cripple the RAF's ability to continue defending its skies. But Marshall knows something the Germans don't. They've underestimated the spirit of the British defenders. "Prepare for attack," Marshall says into the radio. His voice is steady, but his pulse races in his ears. The Spitfire responds to his touch, gliding smoothly as he banks to the right, positioning himself behind the bomber formation. His squadron follows, a tight unit of skilled pilots, ready to make their stand. As the distance closes, Marshall's hands tighten on the controls. He remembers the faces of his comrades who were lost just days before, their planes reduced to wreckage in the sky. He feels their loss like a weight pressing on his chest. But it's not enough to slow him down. If anything, it fuels his determination. The bomber's silhouette fills his sights, and he squeezes the trigger. A stream of bullets tears through the air, striking the bomber's wing. The plane shudders, and in a flash, it bursts into flames, crashing toward the earth below. Marshall doesn't have time to celebrate. The battle continues, and more bombers are already on the way. As the dogfight intensifies, Marshall is keenly aware that the Luftwaffe is relentless. Every sortie feels like the last, and yet the RAF soldiers push back time and time again. The sheer volume of casualties on both sides is staggering. But it's the spirit of the RAF that keeps them in the air. They are outnumbered, outgunned, and exhausted. But they continue to fight. And with every bomber that falls from the sky, they grow a little stronger, a little more defiant. As the sun sets on another long day of fighting, Marshall looks out over the horizon. The sky is streaked with red and orange, and for a moment, there is peace. But only for a moment. In the distance, the sound of German engines grows louder. The battle is far from over. August 20th, 1940, 12,000 feet above the Channel. The air is thick with smoke and the sharp scent of gunpowder. The sky is littered with the wreckage of fallen aircraft. The twisted remains of both British and German planes drifting downward, trailing smoke and fire like fading stars. Flight Sergeant Edward "Eddie" Lawson's Spitfire is caked in the residue of battle. Scratches across the canopy, oil splattered across the wings, and the distinct hum of a damaged engine. His hands tremble on the controls, but he forces them still. Every moment spent in the air is another moment closer to death, and the cost of victory is becoming painfully clear. For all the heroics, for all the incredible courage shown by the RAF, the toll is unbearable. By now, the Luftwaffe has bombed Britain's airfields nearly to ruin, and the RAF's ability to keep up the fight is strained to its breaking point. Every pilot who falls in battle is one fewer to defend the skies, and for every mission, the numbers dwindle. Many young men, like Eddie, are experiencing the unimaginable weight of survival. Eddie's squadron leader Thomas "Tommy" Harding, is a veteran of World War I and has seen more than his fair share of aerial combat. His voice crackles over the radio, steady but laced with a quiet tension. "Keep your wits about you. We're still in this fight, lads. We fight on. But even Tommy knows the truth. The Germans are coming in waves, and though the RAF continues to knock them down, it feels like a never-ending tide. The roar of enemy engines rips through the cockpit, cutting off Eddie's thoughts. He looks up. 2 waves of German bombers are coming in, their formation tight and deadly. The Luftwaffe is relentless, and they have learned from their earlier mistakes. The bombers are now escorted by the deadliest of fighters, the WWIIs, the cream of the Luftwaffe's pilots, and they are far better coordinated than before. Eddie's stomach knots. The odds are now stacked against him. He is outnumbered, and the RAF's defensive resources are stretched thin. But he is not alone. Beside him, his fellow pilots form a tight line, each Spitfire a symbol of defiance. The feeling of camaraderie, the shared knowledge that they are all fighting for the same cause, steels his resolve. As they close in on the German bombers, Eddie's thoughts flash to the countless airmen who have fallen before him. Every face, every name is etched in his memory. They fight not just for Britain, but for each other. Eddie banks sharply to the right, lining up behind one of the bombers. He squeezes the trigger, and a burst of tracer rounds cuts through the sky, striking the bomber's engine. It explodes in a violent flash. But before Eddie can process the kill, a sharp crack rips through his own aircraft. He jerks the controls to the left, narrowly avoiding the oncoming fire of a Bf-109. For a brief moment, he is weightless, caught in the tumbling motion of his Spitfire. The world around him spins in chaotic flashes of light and sound, his senses overwhelmed. His heart is hammering in his chest, and his breath is ragged as he fights to regain control. Eddie's Spitfire snaps back into level flight, miraculously still intact. He looks over his shoulder and sees the streaking contrails of enemy fighters closing in fast. His engine sputters as it tries to recover, but it's clear. He can't last much longer. His wings are ragged, his fuel low. Every second that passes brings him closer to the inevitable. But the German bombers are still in his sights. They are still a threat to Britain's survival. Eddie grits his teeth, pushes the throttle to the limit, and dives back into the fray. As the battle continues, the cost of their victories becomes painfully clear. For every plane that falls from the sky, every bomber that's brought down, the toll on the RAF pilots grows heavier. Yet, despite the loss and the mounting pressure, the RAF continues to fight, because they know they must. August 24th, 1940, 10,000 feet over the English Channel. The sky is a patchwork of dark clouds, illuminated by sporadic bursts of gunfire and explosions. The air smells of burned oil and scorched metal. Flight Lieutenant Peter "Paddy" O'Connor has been flying for hours, the tension in his body like a taut string. His Spitfire is battered, its left wing bearing the scars of a recent dogfight. But it's still in the fight, and that's all that matters. He's exhausted, his eyes gritty from the constant strain of combat. But he has no time to rest. The Luftwaffe's daily attacks have escalated in both intensity and precision. The German strategy is now clear. Crush Britain's will by breaking their air defense network, wiping out their radar stations, and eliminating the RAF's ability to protect the skies. The battle for air superiority is now the only thing standing between Britain and invasion. And every day that passes, the odds grow smaller. But today feels different. On this particular day, for the first time in weeks, the skies above Britain are filled with a palpable sense of hope. The Luftwaffe has committed a new tactic, one that may prove to be their undoing. For reasons that remain unclear to the British, German bombers are now beginning to target London itself. The shift in focus presents a rare opportunity for the RAF. The relentless pressure on the airfields and radar stations had pushed them to the brink of exhaustion. But with the Luftwaffe shifting its focus to London, the RAF now has a chance to strike back in force. And O'Connor knows this could be their moment. If they can catch the Germans off guard, they might be able to turn the tide. The sound of a squadron leader's voice crackles in O'Connor's headset. "Form up, all squadrons. We've got a clear shot. This is it." The clarity of the orders cuts through the haze of fatigue in O'Connor's mind. They're going for it. He can feel the tension build as he lines up with the other pilots, their formation tight and precise. In the distance, a mass of German bombers, Do-17s, Heinkel's 111s, approach the British coastline, unaware of the trap that's been set for them. O'Connor's heart beats faster as his squadron moves into position. The Germans are outnumbered in this formation, and the RAF pilots know this is a chance they cannot afford to miss. O'Connor's fingers curl around the control stick as he closes the gap. His sights lock onto a German bomber, its twin engines humming steadily. The world slows for a split second. The roar of his Spitfire, the whine of the approaching enemy aircraft, the clarity of the moment. He squeezes the trigger, and tracer rounds streak toward the bomber. The engine erupts in a fiery ball of destruction, sending the bomber careening into the ocean below. Another kill, another victory for the RAF. But even as O'Connor and his squadron continue their assault, the Germans push back. In the distance, he sees a formation of Messerschmitt Bf 109s peeling off to engage the British fighters. The battle is not over. It's only just begun. As the day wears on, the Luftwaffe's focus on London will prove to be their downfall. The RAF seizes the opportunity to launch an all-out counterattack. The tables begin to turn, and the momentum shifts in Britain's favor. For the first time in weeks, the RAF's victory seems possible. The enemy is still formidable, but the fighters of Britain are determined, and they will not let go of the sky without a fight. August 29th, 1940, 16,000 feet over London. The roar of Spitfires fills the air as they dart and weave between puffy clouds, their engines vibrating with an intensity that matches the tension in their pilots' veins. Above the shimmering city below, the air is thick with smoke rising from the remnants of German bombs. The city is reeling, but not broken. This is the heart of the Blitz, the relentless bombing campaign designed to break Britain's will. Yet, the British are still standing, still fighting, still flying. Sergeant Michael Mick Reynolds has seen too much over the past few weeks. His hands tremble as he adjusts his goggles, looking at the destruction below. The sight of London in flames stirs something deep inside him. A mixture of sorrow, fury, and determination. The battle has taken a heavy toll. Airfields, factories, and civilian neighborhoods have been leveled. The cost in lives is staggering, both on the ground and in the sky. Yet, despite it all, the RAF continues to hold its ground. Today, that resilience is about to be tested once again. The radio crackles in Reynolds' headset. "Incoming bombers, 12 o'clock high. Form up, lads." His squadron leader's voice is sharp, but there's a subtle shift in the tone. The Germans have underestimated the tenacity of the RAF, and the British are now seizing every opportunity to turn the tables. As Reynolds climbs higher into the sky, he spots the enemy bombers through a break in the clouds. There are dozens of them, their bomb bays open, preparing to unleash destruction on London. These are the same types of bombers the Germans have used for weeks. The Do-17s, Heinkel He-111s, and Junkers Ju-88s. But now, they seem more vulnerable than ever. The RAF has learned how to take down these bombers with deadly precision, and the Luftwaffe's well-oiled machines are beginning to show signs of strain. Their once unbeatable formations now look ragged, their timing off, their approach too predictable. The RAF is no longer reacting. They are now dictating the flow of the battle. Reynolds feels a surge of confidence as he leads his squadron toward the enemy formation, knowing that this is a rare moment where the Germans are outmatched. His Spitfire moves with fluidity, responding to his every command as he lines up the first bomber in his sights. As he fires, the world blurs around him. The bomber's engine explodes in a brilliant flash, and Reynolds pulls up, narrowly avoiding the falling wreckage. It's a moment of exhilaration, but there's no time to celebrate. His squadron is already on to the next target. The rest of the British squadrons follow suit, each pilot pushing the limits of their aircraft, each move a testament to their training and courage. The skies above London, once a death trap, are now filled with the roar of RAF engines hunting their prey. But even as the Luftwaffe falters, it is not yet clear who will claim the skies. The battle is far from won. The Germans, realizing they have underestimated the RAF's resilience, are adjusting their tactics once again. New waves of bombers, more powerful escorts, and different bombing strategies will continue to challenge the RAF's strength and resolve. Reynolds knows the next wave will be just as deadly. But for now, the RAF has found its moment of triumph. The tide is shifting, and it is clear that this battle, the Battle of Britain, will not end until one side is utterly broken. September 7th, 1940, 20,000 feet above the English Channel. The skies have darkened, filled with ominous clouds and the steady hum of German bombers. Flight Sergeant Jack "Johnny" Walker grits his teeth as he climbs higher into the thickening atmosphere, the cold biting through his leather flight jacket. He's been in the air for hours, the fatigue threatening to overwhelm him. But there's no time for rest. The Luftwaffe is throwing everything they have at Britain now. And Johnny knows that today will be one of the most intense battles yet. This is the culmination of the Blitz, the Germans' final attempt to break the British will before launching their planned invasion of the island. The Luftwaffe has increased the scale of its attacks, using larger formations and heavier bombers. Their target today, London, once again. The city has already borne the brunt of the Luftwaffe's fury, but now it will face its greatest test. The roar of engines surrounds Johnny as his Spitfire slices through the air, his squadron leader's voice crackling over the radio. "Formation, get ready. They're coming in hard." Johnny's pulse quickens. The sound of German engines grows louder by the second, a constant reminder of the high-stakes battle ahead. From a distance, Johnny spots the bomber formations. A massive cluster of Heinkel He-111s and Junkers Ju-88s, accompanied by their deadly escort of Bf-109s. There must be hundreds of aircraft heading toward London, and the RAF is woefully outnumbered. Johnny can see the shapes of the bombers, a sight both familiar and terrifying. The Luftwaffe has come to finish the job. But Johnny isn't afraid. He's been in too many dogfights, seen too much destruction, to let fear take hold. Today, he's fighting not just for survival, but for his country, for the men who have already fallen, and for the future of the free world. The weight of it all presses down on him, but there's no time to think. It's all instinct now. His squadron locks into position, and the battle begins in a flash. Tracer rounds light up the sky as the RAF and Luftwaffe engage in a deadly ballet of aerial combat. Johnny lines up on one of the Heinkels, watching as the bomber grows larger in his sights. His heart beats in his chest as he squeezes the trigger, sending a burst of fire into the bomber's engines. The aircraft shudders, its fuselage ablaze, and it spirals toward the sea below. One down, but the fight is far from over. Johnny takes a quick glance at his wingman. The young pilot's face is determined, but his eyes betray a hint of fear. It's been a long day, and the toll of the battle is starting to show. Johnny knows they can't afford to make mistakes. There are still too many bombers left, and the Luftwaffe isn't about to give up. For hours, the battle rages on. The skies above London are choked with smoke and gunfire, and the sound of exploding bombs echoes across the city. The RAF's defenses are being pushed to their absolute limit. Despite their bravery, their losses continue to mount. But the RAF's pilots don't relent. With every bomber that falls from the sky, they grow more determined. This is their final stand. And then, as the sun sets on that fateful day, something incredible happens. The Germans begin to retreat, The sheer weight of their losses, both in men and material, forces them to pull back. The Luftwaffe has finally been beaten back from London's skies. It is a victory that feels like a miracle. The RAF, against all odds, has held the line. But even as Johnny breathes a sigh of relief, he knows the battle is far from over. The Germans will regroup and they will strike again. But for now, Britain has weathered the storm. The skies are theirs. September 8th, 1940, London. The city lies beneath a heavy silence, broken only by the distant hum of repair crews working tirelessly to rebuild the shattered infrastructure. The air smells faintly of smoke, and the once gleaming rooftops of the city are now scarred by the wounds of war. The bombers have stopped for now, and the skies, for the first time in weeks, are empty. There is a momentary peace, but it is fragile. In the cockpit of his Spitfire, Johnny Walker can hardly believe what he has just witnessed. The Luftwaffe, after days of relentless bombing, has retreated. The skies above London, which just hours ago had been filled with the shrieking sound of air raids and the roar of German engines, are now clear. Johnny lowers his goggles, the cold wind whipping past him, and exhales deeply, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle over him. He looks out over the channel, the waters still and unthreatening beneath the dimming light of the late afternoon. The Luftwaffe had thrown everything at them, wave after wave of bombers and fighters, each more intense than the last. Yet, against all odds, the RAF had fought them off. London has been spared, and with it, so has the heart of Britain. For Johnny and the men in the squadron, it's a hard-earned victory, but one that doesn't come without its cost. The memory of the pilots they've lost over the last few weeks, their comrades who never made it home, lingers heavily in the air. The sheer scale of the battle and the loss of life, both British and German, is staggering. But for now, they have won. And that victory is a lifeline for Britain, a momentary reprieve from the looming shadow of Nazi occupation. Back on the ground, the airfields are quiet. But the work is far from over. The RAF's losses have been heavy, and many of the planes are in desperate need of repair. Mechanics, pilots, and ground crews move in a coordinated frenzy, preparing for the inevitable return of the German assault. The British will not rest on their laurels, not even for a moment. Every victory is a temporary one, and they know that the next wave of bombers could be just over the horizon. Johnny stands on the tarmac, looking out at the horizon, his flight suit still caked in grime and oil. He's tired, but there's a strange sense of accomplishment that fills him. It's hard to articulate the weight of what they've just achieved. The British people are still standing, still fighting, and they've just made history. They've denied the Luftwaffe a decisive victory, and for the moment, that's all that matters. The Battle of Britain isn't over. The Luftwaffe may have pulled back for now, but the war is far from won. Johnny knows this reprieve is only temporary. The Germans will regroup, and the fight will continue. But for the first time in months, there is a glimmer of hope. Britain is not done fighting, and neither are its defenders. As Johnny boards the transport back to base, he feels the weight of the day's battle begin to settle in. The sounds of the engines roar to life, and he leans back in his seat, staring out at the landscape below. The country has survived the first wave, but the war is far from over. September 15th, 1940, 10,000 feet above the channel. The sun has barely risen, casting a dull golden hue over the sea. The air is still, the calm before another storm. Squadron leader Charles "Charlie" Mason scans the horizon, his eyes narrowing against the early morning light. He knows what's coming. The Luftwaffe is about to make one final push, and the RAF will have to face them head-on once more. For weeks now, the Germans have been testing Britain's resolve, and with each passing day, the stakes have grown higher. The Battle of Britain has reached its climax. The Luftwaffe's strategy has been to pummel Britain into submission, to break the Royal Air Force and pave the way for a Nazi invasion. But each time they come, the British fighters strike back with ferocity, preventing the Luftwaffe from achieving its objective. Charlie's squadron has already lost several good men, but they continue to fight. The Spitfires are beginning to show the strain, their engines strained from endless sorties, their frames battered by near misses and enemy fire. Yet, there's no time for rest. Not now. Not when the survival of Britain depends on holding the line. Through the haze of early morning fog, Charlie spots the first formation of enemy aircraft. A massive wave of bombers, their gray silhouettes growing larger by the second, accompanied by the ever-dangerous Bf-109. 19 fighters. This is it. The Luftwaffe's final attempt to destroy Britain's defenses once and for all. They've thrown everything into this assault, and they believe that this time they will succeed. But Charlie knows something the Germans don't. Britain's resolve is not so easily crushed. The RAF is battered, yes, but not broken. The pilots are exhausted, but their spirit is unyielding. They have survived months of constant bombardment, and they know that if they fall now, there will be no tomorrow. They are fighting for more than just air superiority. They are fighting for survival. Break formation. Head for the bombers. Charlie commands over the radio, his voice steady but laced with urgency. His squadron responds immediately, breaking from their tight formation and diving toward the oncoming enemy. The bombers are vulnerable now, unprotected by their fighter escorts, who have peeled off to engage the RAF's frontline fighters. This is their chance, a rare opening. Charlie pushes his Spitfire into a steep dive, the world outside his canopy blurring as the G-forces press him deeper into his seat. He locks onto the nearest Heinkel He-111, aiming carefully as the bomber grows larger in his sights. As he squeezes the trigger, a series of tracer rounds strike the engine, sending the aircraft into a fiery spiral. Another kill. But there's no time to think. The sky is still full of enemies. The dogfight around him intensifies as more bombers and fighters join the fray. Charlie's vision narrows to the task at hand, his mind focused on the intricate ballet of destruction unfolding before him. The German bombers are still pushing forward, but now they are taking fire from all directions. The RAF's pilots are pushing them back, one plane at a time, and the Germans are starting to realize that their final push may have failed. As the battle rages on, Charlie sees a familiar sight. One of his wingmen, a young pilot with barely 50 hours of flying experience, is caught in a deadly tailspin. The Bf-109 had gotten the jump on him, and now the young man is struggling to regain control of his aircraft. Charlie pulls up sharply, positioning himself behind the German fighter. He lines up his shot and fires, sending the Bf-109 into a tailspin of its own. The young pilot pulls out just in time, his Spitfire wobbling but intact. "Get back in formation," Charlie commands over the radio, his voice hoarse. The young pilot responds, shaky but relieved. The Luftwaffe has underestimated the resolve of the RAF, and today they will pay the price. As the battle continues, the tide begins to turn. The Luftwaffe's bombers are falling from the sky, their formations shattering under the constant assault from the RAF. One by one, their aircraft are picked off. The relentless advance halted. The Germans had come with everything they had, but it was not enough. The final wave of bombers begins to retreat, their once pristine formations now broken, disorganized, and crippled. Charlie watches as the last of the enemy aircraft disappear into the distance, their engines fading into the horizon. The sky above Britain, for the first time in months, is still. Charlie allows himself a brief moment to breathe. His hands are still gripping the controls, his heart pounding in his chest. The battle has been won, but the cost is high. The RAF has held the skies, but at what price? September 16th, 1940, RAF Biggin Hill, just outside London. The hum of the engines fades into a heavy, almost oppressive silence as the last of the Spitfires land on the tarmac. Exhausted pilots, their faces drawn and haggard from the continuous strain of battle, disembark their aircraft with the mechanical precision of men who have been through hell and back. Their eyes are bloodshot, their hands shaking as they remove their helmets. The sounds of the airfield seem to echo in the quiet aftermath. The squeak of wheels on asphalt, the clang of metal on metal, the distant whirring of ground crews tending to the battered planes. Squadron leader Charlie Mason, who had led his men through the last push of the Luftwaffe's massive assault, stands near the edge of the airfield, staring out at the horizon. His Spitfire, one of the few still airworthy, is parked not far away, its nose tilted upward like a proud animal. The rest of the squadron, once a tight-knit unit, now appears fractured, each pilot absorbed in their own silent thoughts. The cost of victory is a burden heavier than Charlie anticipated. The sight of the sky clearing, free from the German bombers, is a relief. But it comes with a deep, gnawing sense of loss. The Luftwaffe's attack was relentless, and while Britain has held, the RAF has paid dearly for that survival. The casualty reports have already begun to trickle in, and the numbers are devastating. Over the past 2 days, the RAF has lost dozens of pilots. Some of them seasoned veterans, others young men barely out of their teens. The numbers are staggering. Each aircraft that falls represents not just the loss of a valuable asset, but the loss of a life, of a comrade. Charlie knows that many of the men he fought beside will never return. They were heroes, and their sacrifices cannot be forgotten. As Charlie walks across the airfield, his boots crunching against the gravel, he sees the grim faces of the ground crews too. They've worked around the clock, repairing damaged planes, tending to the wounded, and preparing for the next wave. The toll on them, too, is evident. The war effort has taken every ounce of strength, and for all the victories won in the skies, it feels like the price may be too much to bear. Charlie stops at the tent where the intelligence officers are compiling the battle reports. He pulls back the flap and enters. Inside, a map of southern England is pinned to the wall, dotted with red and yellow markers that represent enemy targets and hit zones. The officers are at work, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of a lamp. There's a brief silence as Charlie enters, but the officers quickly get back to their work. "We've pushed them back, Charlie," one of the officers says without looking up. "But at what cost?" He points to the map, where dozens of markers indicate bombed cities, flattened airfields, and the remains of downed aircraft. "They'll be back." Charlie nods solemnly, the weight of the truth sinking in. The Luftwaffe's assault may have been repelled for now, but the German High Command will not give up. They will regroup, and another offensive is inevitable. He feels the crushing fatigue of the past few months bearing down on him. The Luftwaffe may have failed to break the RAF today, but Charlie knows it's only a temporary reprieve. The Battle of Britain is far from over. He steps out of the tent and looks up at the sky, which is now clear. The sunlight is soft, as if the heavens themselves are offering a moment of peace. But even as Charlie stands there, the sound of a distant engine reaches his ears. It's the unmistakable hum of a German aircraft. His heart skips a beat. Is it another wave of bombers? No, this time, it's a lone reconnaissance plane, flying low over the channel. But it's a reminder that the war is never truly still. For the RAF, there is no true rest. There are no moments of respite, not while the enemy is still out there, waiting, planning. And so, despite the exhaustion and the grief, Charlie turns away from the sky and heads back to his aircraft, preparing for whatever comes next. Victory, while hard-earned, is fleeting. And as long as the Luftwaffe remains a threat, the fight continues. September 18th, 1940, 18,000 feet over the channel. The air is still, the sky a crisp blue, unmarred by the ominous smoke of distant battles. Flight Lieutenant Bobby Taylor feels the cold bite of the wind against his skin as he adjusts the throttle, his hands moving automatically as his Spitfire cruises along the flight path. His eyes scan the sky in wide, sweeping motions, ever vigilant. The battle may have slowed, but it is far from over. For Bobby and the other pilots, there is no rest, no time to heal. Each mission feels like a roll of the dice, the tension hanging thick in the air, the understanding that each sortie could be their last. His squadron had just returned from a high-stakes engagement over London, their aircraft battered and worn, but the victory was theirs. For now. But Bobby's mind is not on the mission at hand. It is still occupied with the faces of those he has lost, the men he had fought beside, the pilots who had been like brothers. As the battle rages on, their numbers dwindle. Each day brings new losses, and each victory is tempered by the bitter reality of what has been sacrificed to achieve it. He takes a deep breath, forcing the memories back to the recesses of his mind. Focus. The enemy is out there, and as long as the Luftwaffe remains a threat, the fight must continue. Suddenly, the radio crackles, breaking the heavy silence. Enemy sighted. Bombers coming in from the east. Squadrons, scramble. Bobby's heart leaps into his throat. It's not a drill. It's real. The Luftwaffe is back, and they've learned from their past mistakes. The ground beneath him seems to shift, and the Spitfire responds as he pushes the throttle forward, the aircraft surging ahead. The sound of the engines revs in his ears, and the familiar vibration of the cockpit settles into his chest. His squadron falls into formation, the lead plane taking the lead. Bobby's mind sharpens, instinct taking over as he follows the command. Out in the distance, a large formation of German bombers appears, their massive wings cutting through the clouds. The Heinkel He-111s and Junkers Ju-88s are accompanied by their deadly Bf-109 escorts, sleek, deadly, and swift. The Germans, having learned from their past failures, are now trying something new. They are deploying bombers in staggered formations, hoping to confuse the RAF's interceptors and spread out their defenses. Bobby knows that this is not just a raid. This is another attempt to wear the RAF down, to break the will of Britain's defenders. The Germans are relentless, and their tactics continue to evolve. But Bobby's resolve is equally unwavering. This is his sky, and he will fight to keep it. Lock onto the bombers, comes the order from Squadron Leader Graham Davies. No mercy. We end this now. The words are sharp, resolute. There's no hesitation, no uncertainty. Bobby nods to himself as he dives into the formation, targeting the closest bomber. His guns roar to life, and the familiar rush of adrenaline floods his system. Each shot is deliberate, each movement calculated. The bomber in front of him shudders as the first rounds find their mark. The plane's engine explodes in a violent fireball, the aircraft spiraling downward into the channel below. Bobby doesn't slow down. There's no time for satisfaction. His eyes scan for the next target. Another bomber. He takes aim. The Spitfire's engines roar as the aircraft dives again. The ground below seems to fall away as the cockpit glass shatters with the sound of gunfire. The target goes down. A second victory. But still, there are more to come. More bombers, more fighters, more lives on the line. The battle becomes a blur of flashing metal, tracer rounds, and deafening noise. The Luftwaffe fights with the desperation of a wounded animal, and Bobby can feel the weight of that desperation in his every movement. The RAF is not invincible, but they are resolute. They will not yield. As the final waves of bombers retreat and the last Bf-109s scatter in defeat, Bobby feels the familiar sense of exhaustion settle over him. The battle is won, but the cost of that victory is etched deep in his bones. The sky is clear again, but he knows it won't last long. The Luftwaffe will return. They always do. The engines of his Spitfire slow, the hum fading into the distance as the squadron makes its way back to base. The adrenaline begins to drain from his system, replaced by the weight of fatigue. There is no time to celebrate, no time to rest. But as Bobby flies back over the English Channel, his thoughts drift to the city below. London, though scarred, remains standing. And with every victory, the British people, and the men who fight for them, draw one step closer to prevailing. September 25th, 1940. RAF Duxford, East Anglia. The early morning mist clings to the grass as the first rays of sunlight cut through the fog, casting a pale light over the airfield. The sound of boots crunching on gravel is almost soothing in the otherwise quiet morning. The roar of engines, the clanging of metal, and the hurried steps of the ground crew, all the usual sounds of a wartime airbase, have a dullness to them today. The frenetic energy of the past weeks has begun to settle into a heavy, pervasive weariness. Pilot Officer Henry Hank Miller stands near his Spitfire, arms crossed, staring out at the tarmac. He's been in the air for days, the strain of constant combat beginning to wear on him. His eyes are bleary from lack of sleep, his hands rough from hours of gripping the controls. There's an unease in his chest, a feeling that won't leave him no matter how many victories they achieve. They've held the Luftwaffe back, yes, but for how long? There's no certainty, no guarantee that the battle is over. The Battle of Britain has dragged on for nearly 4 months. London and the southern coast have borne the brunt of the Luftwaffe's attacks, and the RAF has fought tooth and nail to keep the skies clear. But even with the latest victories, the cost of this war is rising daily. The losses are staggering. The sense of danger never truly leaves, even as the airfield feels calmer now than it has in weeks. The Luftwaffe has pulled back from their full-on assaults, but they are far from defeated. The ground crew moves around him in a mechanical dance, the same routine every day. Check the engines, repair the wings, replace the fuel. Their faces are grim, their movements tired. Henry sees them, but his mind is elsewhere, thinking about the pilots who have yet to return from their last sorties, wondering how long before it's his turn to face the enemy again. Overhead, another flight of Spitfires climbs into the sky, their engines cutting through the still morning air. Hank feels a tightness in his chest. The thought of returning to the airfield after every engagement, the knowledge that his fellow pilots may never come back, is becoming more than he can bear. Each day is another day closer to the end, an end he's not sure he's ready for. The radio in his hand crackles to life. Hank, ready for another one? The voice is friendly, but Hank detects the familiar tension there, the underlying weight of the request. He smiles faintly, though it doesn't reach his eyes. As ready as I'll ever be, he responds, straightening his flight suit. In the air, the battle has never been just about planes or bombs. It has been about the will to survive, the determination to push on despite the odds. The RAF pilots, young men like Hank, have been thrust into a war they didn't ask for. Yet they have fought, fiercely, without hesitation. And though the skies are quieter now, Hank knows the fight is far from over. Just as he's about to climb into his aircraft, Charlie Mason, now a veteran of the battle, approaches him. The older man's face is lined with exhaustion, but there's a sense of quiet resolve in his eyes. "You okay, Hank?" Charlie asks, his voice low. Hank nods, though the weight of the battle, the weight of the sacrifices they've all made, sits heavy on his shoulders. "I'm here. We're still standing, aren't we?" Charlie's gaze flickers toward the sky, where a few distant specks of aircraft are circling. The battle may have been won, but the war is far from over. "We are, but every day is a new one, and every day the Germans come back. We fight because we have to." Hank doesn't respond. What can he say? The words don't seem to carry any weight, any comfort. The truth is simple. They keep fighting because they have no choice. If they stop, they lose. If they lose, Britain falls. He climbs into the cockpit, tightening the straps of his harness. The engine roars to life beneath him, the vibrations of the aircraft humming through his body. The Spitfire feels like an extension of himself, a part of him, perhaps the last piece of hope he can hold on to. "Take care up there, Hank," Charlie calls over the radio as Hank rolls his plane toward the runway. "I will," he replies, but the words feel hollow, empty. He has no promises to make. He doesn't know if he'll return. None of them do. As his Spitfire takes off into the sky, Hank feels the familiar rush of adrenaline. The air feels colder today, sharper, as though the world itself is holding its breath. The tension hangs like a storm cloud over the airfield, and he knows that no matter how many bombers they bring down, no matter how many victories they achieve, the war is not over. But for now, they fly. For now, they hold the line. October 2nd, 1940, 12,000 feet over the English Channel. The morning haze is thick, blurring the line between sea and sky. Hank Miller's Spitfire cuts through the air, its engine humming steadily beneath him. He feels the familiar tension in his shoulders, the quiet, constant hum of anxiety that never seems to leave. His squadron has been flying these daily missions for months now, each sortie a reminder of the fine line they walk between life and death. The sound of the engine is a constant presence in his ears, like the heartbeat of the war itself. It's a sound Hank has learned to rely on, even as it reminds him of the risk, the danger, the reality of the fight. The Luftwaffe continues its air raids, but the pressure they once exerted on the RAF has shifted. The German tactics have changed, and the skies are filled with new challenges. But Hank knows that this fight is far from over. The radio crackles to life. "All squadrons, check in. We've got a report of incoming bombers from the east." Hank's grip tightens on the controls as his heart races. The calm of the morning is suddenly gone. Another mission. Another chance to prove that they are still standing, still fighting. Ahead, he can see the first flicker of distant engines, the unmistakable formations of German bombers cutting through the clouds. His stomach knots. This is what he's trained for. But each time it feels more personal. Each raid, each bombing run, brings him closer to the grim reality of what this war truly costs. "Form up, lads. Let's show them who controls these skies," comes the voice of Squadron Leader Davies over the comms. His tone is calm, but there's a hard edge to it. The leadership, the men around him, they've all become accustomed to this endless struggle. They know the stakes. They know what's at risk. Hank checks his instruments, adjusts his throttle, and banks left to join the others in the formation. The sound of their engines reverberates through the air, a chorus of defiance against the coming storm. The bombers are still miles away, but they are relentless. The Germans don't stop, and neither do the RAF pilots. As they close the distance, Hank spots the enemy bombers. He sees them clearly now, the lumbering, ominous shapes of the Heinkel He-111s and Junkers Ju-88s. They are accompanied by the faster, more dangerous Bf-109s, their sleek forms cutting through the sky like predators. Hank can feel the familiar weight in his chest, the pressure that builds when you know the battle is upon you. The command comes through his headset. "Engage at will." Hank doesn't hesitate. His Spitfire responds with precision as he dives toward the formation, lining up his target. The bomber fills his sights, and he squeezes the trigger. A burst of tracers erupts from his guns, hitting the bomber's wing. The aircraft shudders, and then flames burst from the engine. It spirals downward, a fiery streak in the sky, falling to the waters below. For a moment, Hank is filled with a rush of success. But it's fleeting. The sky around him erupts into chaos. The German fighters are on them, diving out of the sun, streaking across his path with deadly accuracy. Hank swerves to avoid the first volley of fire, the heat of the bullets flying dangerously close. The roar of his Spitfire's engine drowns out everything but the deafening rush of wind and the unmistakable sound of enemy fire. His heart pounds as he banks sharply, his breath quickening. The dogfight has begun in earnest. The Luftwaffe's precision is impressive, but the RAF's resolve is unshakable. Hank's Spitfire weaves through the sky, narrowly dodging the fire of the Bf-109s. His own guns bark again, another streak of tracers cutting through the air. One of the enemy fighters jerks violently as it takes the hit, spiraling out of control and crashing into the sea below. The skies are alive with fire, with explosions, with the shriek of engines. Hank fights to stay in control, to keep his formation intact, to keep his focus. For all the victories they've had, for all the times they've held the line, there is always the fear that this could be their last. The unrelenting pressure of constant combat, the constant awareness that death is never far away, has begun to take its toll. But the battle rages on. Another enemy bomber is taken down, another fighter is left in flames, and still, Hank presses on. It's not about glory. It's about survival. It's about protecting the sky that has become their only refuge. The fight is not just for the present, but for the future of Britain. For a future where freedom still has a place in the world. As the final German bombers retreat, the RAF pilots, exhausted and bloodied, turn back toward their airfields. The sound of their engines is no longer a rush of adrenaline, but a slow hum of weariness. They have won, but each victory costs them more. Hank's Spitfire soars back toward the airfield, the weight of the day's battle pressing on him. The skies, once filled with chaos and danger, are now calm, peaceful even. But beneath that peace lies the understanding that this moment of respite is fleeting. The war is far from over, and the RAF will be called upon again. For now, Hank breathes a little easier. But deep down, he knows that the price of perseverance is steep, and no matter how many victories they achieve, the cost of this war will continue to rise. October 10th, 1940. RAF Kenley, South London. The first signs of autumn are visible in the early morning light. The ground is covered with a thin mist that clings to the grass, the air crisp with the sharp chill of an impending change in season. Hank Miller stands at the edge of the airfield, his hands stuffed into his jacket pockets, watching as his comrades prepare their aircraft for another day of combat. The routine is familiar now. Check the engines, inspect the wings, refuel, and head back into the skies. The relentless cycle of battle seems endless. He looks over to the hangars, where several damaged Spitfires are being worked on by ground crews. Some of the planes are barely recognizable, their bodies scorched, their wings riddled with bullet holes. The technicians move with urgency, repairing what they can, knowing that time is their enemy. There's a sense of grim determination in the air, a shared understanding that despite the damage, the RAF must keep flying. There is no choice. There is no rest. The battle has taken its toll on all of them. Hank can see it in the faces of the men around him. The constant strain of combat, the endless sorties, the never-ending barrage of German bombers and fighters. It's wearing them down. The young pilots, eager and full of resolve at first, now show signs of fatigue. The seasoned veterans, like Charlie Mason, are showing the weight of leadership, their faces etched with lines that speak of months of stress and loss. Despite the toll, the RAF has not yielded. The Germans may have been relentless in their assaults, but the British pilots have proven that they will not break. In the face of overwhelming odds, they stand firm. This is what they are fighting for: the preservation of Britain's freedom, the survival of their people. It is a fight that requires every ounce of strength, and the RAF's resilience is undeniable. As Hank walks toward his plane, he feels a sense of connection to the men around him. They are, in a sense, all that stands between Britain and destruction. The Battle of Britain, though far from over, has already become a symbol of hope. The world is watching, and the eyes of history are upon them. They may be outnumbered, they may be exhausted, but they are not defeated. Ready for another one, Hank? The voice is familiar. It's Charlie Mason, his face half shadowed by the brim of his flight helmet, his expression unreadable. But there's something in his eyes that Hank can't quite place. It's a look of both exhaustion and defiance, a quiet acknowledgement that the fight is not yet over, and perhaps that it never will be. Always, Hank replies, though the words feel hollow. How many more of these days will they survive? How many more sorties will they fly before they are worn down beyond repair? Charlie nods, his gaze lingering for a moment longer. We're almost there. I can feel it. Just keep flying. Hank nods in return, but the weight of Charlie's words lingers with him. Almost there. What does that really mean? How much longer can they keep up this pace? The constant strain of flying, the constant risk of death, the fear that each mission could be their last. It's all beginning to feel like an endless cycle. They both climb into their aircraft, the engines roaring to life as they taxi toward the runway. Hank's Spitfire, though battered, still responds with a smoothness he has come to rely on. He checks his instruments, feels the hum of the engine beneath him, and takes a deep breath. The ground crew steps back, and with a final glance at the airfield below, Hank pushes the throttle forward. The runway stretches out before him, and he feels the familiar weightlessness as the Spitfire lifts off the ground, rising into the sky. The horizon is wide, the sky clear for now. The vast expanse of England stretches beneath him, and for a brief moment, the world feels peaceful. But Hank knows better. There is always the threat of the Luftwaffe, always the possibility that today could be the day they face a final, catastrophic blow. Above the clouds, the world changes. Hank's thoughts fade away as his mind sharpens, focusing entirely on the task at hand. His squadron, trailing behind him, falls into position. The radio crackles to life. Reports of incoming bombers. Get ready, gentlemen. Another mission. Another battle. Another chance to prove they can hold the skies. The first bomber appears on the horizon, its massive form cutting through the clouds. It's a familiar sight now. The Heinkel He-111s and Junkers Ju-88s, their crews intent on their mission. But the RAF will not let them reach their target. Take them down, comes the command over the radio. Hank banks hard to the left, diving toward the formation. His mind is sharp, every movement calculated. The adrenaline floods his system as he lines up on the nearest bomber, his guns blazing as he squeezes the trigger. The tracer rounds strike home, and the bomber explodes in a brilliant flash, plummeting into the sea below. The fight continues. It always does. The Luftwaffe is relentless, and the RAF's resolve is unyielding. But with each passing day, the men of the Royal Air Force prove that their spirit, their courage, is stronger than the threat that looms above them. They are, as Winston Churchill would later call them, the few who have held the fate of the free world in their hands. And for now, at least, that fight is theirs to win. October 14th, 1940. RAF Hornchurch, Essex. The sun is beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a soft golden light across the airfield. The gentle hum of the airbase, normally a constant presence in the background of wartime life, feels quieter tonight. The sound of engines, the shuffle of boots on gravel, the voices of the ground crew working into the twilight. They are all familiar sounds to Hank. But tonight, they feel different. There's a weight in the air that he can't shake. He leans against the wing of his Spitfire, the cool metal of the aircraft contrasting with the warmth of the setting sun. His eyes scan the horizon, the long stretch of countryside visible just beyond the edge of the airfield. And it's hard to believe sometimes that just beyond this quiet, pastoral landscape lies the turmoil of war. The skies, once peaceful and open, have been transformed into a battleground. And Hank, like the other pilots, has been thrust into the heart of that battle. But even as the battle has raged on, there's a growing sense of unease in Hank's chest. The cost of these victories has begun to manifest in ways that can no longer be ignored. The pilots who have fallen in the air, the friends who have never come back from their missions, it's starting to feel like a weight that he can't outrun. Another day, Hank? It's Charlie Mason's voice, calm as ever, though Hank can hear the undercurrent of fatigue beneath it. The older pilot's face is as lined and worn as the Spitfires they fly, the months of relentless fighting leaving their mark. Hank looks at him, the unease in his chest settling into something heavier. Another day, same as the last. His voice is flat, drained. There's no joy in this fight anymore, no thrill. There's only survival. Charlie nods, his expression unreadable. It's all we can do, right? Keep flying. He glances over at the ground crews, who are already starting to move toward the planes, preparing for the next round. But it's not going to stop. Not until the Germans are beaten. Not until we win. Hank says nothing in response, just watches as his friend walks off toward the briefing tent. The familiar routine. The endless cycle. The weight of it all is beginning to feel like too much. That night, as the pilots gather for their briefing, the reality of the war presses in again. The Luftwaffe is not done. The new tactic is one of attrition. Keep the RAF in the air. Keep the pressure on. Wear them down. For every bomber they down, there's always another wave behind it. For every fighter they defeat, there are more coming. The faces around the table are grim, their eyes hollow with exhaustion. The officers deliver the usual briefing, reports of incoming bombers, of patrols over the channel, of the need to be vigilant. But Hank can't focus. He hears the words, but they don't seem to matter. The mission, the strategy, the enemy. It all feels like a blur. What matters is the weight of what's being asked of them. How many more of their comrades will fall before this is over? How much longer can they keep this up? As the briefing ends and the pilots file out to prepare for the next round of combat, Hank feels a growing sense of emptiness inside him. They keep fighting, but for what? To hold on to a piece of sky? To defend a country teetering on the brink of invasion? The futility of it all begins to creep into his thoughts, though he pushes it down. There is no time for doubt, no time for weakness. The next day's sortie brings the same grim routine. The roar of engines, the rush of wind as the Spitfire soars into the sky. Hank's squadron forms up and moves into position as the familiar sight of German bombers comes into view. The feeling of dread, of knowing what's to come, has become second nature. The constant threat of death has seeped into their bones, and it's hard to remember a time when they weren't at war. They engage, diving into the fray, with the practiced ease of soldiers who have fought together for too long. Hank takes down a bomber, the familiar rush of adrenaline filling his body as the enemy plane plummets into the sea. But even as he celebrates the kill, another wave of bombers appears, and another. The fight never ends. The toll is taking its shape in small, subtle ways, in the quiet silence between missions, in the way the pilots stare at their aircraft as if they don't want to climb into them again, in the growing number of empty chairs at the table during debriefs, the faces that are no longer there. It's hard to ignore the truth. They are all slowly being worn down. As Hank returns to the airfield, his plane once again a victim of the constant battle, he realizes just how fragile the victories are. Each win, each downed bomber, comes at the cost of something deeper. The airfields are quieter now. The land beneath them slowly becoming a graveyard for the fighters who had once stood proud. But still, they keep flying, because they must. October 20th, 1940, 16,000 feet over the channel. The sky is an endless expanse of gray, thick clouds swirling below, obscuring the waters beneath. Hank Miller's Spitfire cuts through the air like a dagger, slicing the wind with its sleek wings. His mind feels detached, the monotony of endless flights clouding his thoughts. The familiar rush of adrenaline before a battle is still there, but it has become muted. The anxiety is now routine. The fear of death, once an alien concept, now feels like an old friend. The same sense of dread, the same realization that each sortie could be his last. The Luftwaffe's waves are as relentless as ever. The Germans have adjusted their tactics, now attacking in staggered formations, trying to catch the RAF off guard, to break the defense lines. But the British pilots have adapted as well. The dogfights are faster, the attacks sharper, and the losses more devastating. The radio crackles to life. Reports of incoming bombers, heading towards the southeast. Squadron leaders, take your formations. This is not a drill. Hank's heart tightens in his chest. Another wave. Another fight. The sense of duty still burns inside him, but the exhaustion has begun to seep in and deeper. He has flown hundreds of miles, shot down countless planes, and witnessed more deaths than he cares to remember. But the war goes on. Squadron, form up. Squadron leader Davy's voice comes through the radio. It's calm, professional, but Hank can hear the undercurrent of fatigue in his words. The sky is still. The air is heavy with the weight of what's to come. As Hank falls into position behind his squadron leader, his thoughts drift to the comrades he's lost over the past few months. The faces of the young pilots who had joined the RAF with such enthusiasm, now forever lost in the pages of history. One of the newer pilots, Lieutenant Marty James, is flying just ahead of Hank. He's young, eager, and still wears the wide-eyed expression of someone who hasn't yet fully grasped the brutal reality of combat. Hank watches him from behind, a tight knot forming in his stomach. Marty reminds him of himself when he first joined the RAF. The raw excitement, the unshaken belief in victory. But Hank knows better now. The war has a way of stripping that away. You can only carry that kind of hope for so long before the weight of death and loss drags you down. The bombers appear on the horizon, a massive formation of Heinkel He-111s and Junkers Ju-88s, flanked by a swarm of Bf-109s. The enemy fighters are sharp and well-coordinated, their formations precise. This is what the Luftwaffe has been working toward. A final, decisive strike. Hank's squadron leader signals the attack, and the Spitfires drop down into a steep dive. The wind rushes past, the roar of the engines drowning out all other sound. Hank's grip tightens on the controls, his hands now used to the motions, his mind focused only on the task ahead. The enemy bombers are coming into range, and Hank lines up on the closest Heinkel, aiming for its engines. He fires, sending a stream of tracer rounds into the bomber's belly. It bursts into flames, trailing smoke as it plummets to the sea below. But the victory is short-lived. Another wave of Bf-109s swoops in, and the dogfight erupts in earnest. The air is thick with gunfire, tracer rounds lighting up the sky like fireworks. Hank dodges and weaves, narrowly avoiding a collision with a Bf-109 that pulls up just in time to avoid him. His heart is pounding in his chest, but it's the same rhythm he's gotten used to. The battle is familiar now. The violence, the chaos, all of it feels like part of the landscape. But as Hank looks over his shoulder, he sees a flash of light in the distance. One of his wingmen, Lieutenant Marty, is caught in a deadly tailspin. The Bf-109s have closed in, and the young pilot's Spitfire is trailing smoke. Hank's heart lurches as he sees Marty's plane spiral downward, the wings buckling under the force. There's no time to reach him, no time to save him. Hank watches helplessly as the plane disappears into the ocean below. A cold emptiness floods through him, but Hank knows there's no time for grief. The fight is still going on. The mission is still in motion. But in that moment, the cost of the war feels like it's suffocating him. How many more of his comrades will fall? How many more pilots will vanish from this world before the war is over? As the dogfight continues, the Luftwaffe begins to retreat, their formations breaking apart in disarray. The remaining bombers, battered and broken, pull back, their mission a failure. The RAF has won again, but at what cost? Hank pulls his Spitfire out of the dive, his engine sputtering from the stress of the constant combat. He turns back toward the airfield, his thoughts numb. Marty is gone. Another young life lost to the skies. And as Hank watches the horizon, the weight of the day's battle settles over him. Another victory, but another piece of his humanity has been lost. The toll of war is beginning to show in every pilot, every airman. The victory may belong to the few, but the cost is being paid by all. October 21st, 1940. RAF Biggin Hill. The silence in the mess hall was heavier than the fog that clung to the airfield. Hank didn't land with his squadron. He'd landed hours later, alone, his fuel gauge on empty and his ammunition spent. He hadn't just fought. He had hunted, staying in the air long after the Luftwaffe retreated, searching for anything to shoot at. Long after the cold numbness of watching Marty die had been replaced by a white-hot, silent rage. He sat at the empty table, staring into a cup of cold tea. Charlie Mason sat down across from him, his face etched with a familiar weariness. "You were reckless today, Hank," Charlie said, his voice quiet, not accusing. "I got 2 kills after the squadron broke off," Hank replied, his voice flat. "That's not the point. You broke formation. You didn't answer the radio. You flew on anger." Charlie leaned forward. "Anger gets you killed. It makes you stupid. Marty was a kid, yes. But if you let his death break your discipline, you'll be the next one we're drinking to." Hank's hand tightened around the mug, his knuckles white. "At least I feel something. You just mark it down in a logbook and order another pint. He's gone, Charlie, and you're just cold." Charlie stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly in the silent room. "That's the difference between us, Hank. I'm not cold. I'm old. I've been burying boys like Marty since 1917. You think this is new? You fly with that rage tomorrow, you'll be dead by noon. And I'll be the one writing the letter to your mother." He walked out, leaving Hank alone with the ghost of the boy he couldn't save. October 22nd, 1940, 14,000 feet over the channel. The alarm had scrambled them to intercept a fast-moving group of raiders. This time, there was no massive bomber formation, just a swarm of Bf-109s flying a fighter sweep, trying to lure the RAF into a fight. Hank didn't care. His blood was still boiling from the night before. Charlie's words stung because they were true, and he hated him for it. "Bandits, 3 o'clock high. Watch yourselves." Davies' voice crackled. The sky instantly dissolved into chaos. Hank saw a 109 flash past, its yellow nose cone identifying it as a plane from an expertant squadron. He forgot all discipline. He forgot his wingman. He forgot Charlie. He just saw red. "Hank, damn it, you're 6. Charlie's voice screamed over the radio, but Hank was already in a steep dive, chasing the yellow-nosed fighter. "He's mine." Hank snarled into his mask. He poured a long 3-second burst into the 109, watching with grim satisfaction as its engine exploded. He pulled up triumphant into a sky that was suddenly empty. Too empty. Clang, clang, clang. The sound was like a hammer hitting the fuselage from behind. The cockpit filled with smoke. A 20mm cannon shell had ripped through his engine block. His control stick went limp. Flames licked at his boots through the metal. "Mayday! Mayday! I'm hit! Engine's on fire! I'm going down!" He fumbled for the canopy release, the G-forces of his uncontrolled spin pinning him to his seat. With a desperate heave, he jettisoned the canopy and threw himself out into the freezing, violent air. He saw his Spitfire, his beautiful machine, corkscrew into the sea below as he pulled the ripcord. October 23, 1940, Kent. He landed hard in a farmer's field, the impact sending a searing pain up his leg. He had bailed out over land, miles from his airfield. He was alive, and he was alone. He spent the night in a barn, shivering, his rage replaced by a profound, humbling fear. The war wasn't a scoreboard. It wasn't a duel. It was a cold, muddy field in Kent, with a sprained ankle and the smell of wet hay, knowing that the fight was still happening miles above him, without him. The next morning, he limped into a small village. He wasn't met as a hero. He was met by the home guard, a baker, a postman, and 2 old men who had fought in the Somme, all of them armed with ancient rifles. For a terrifying 20 minutes, they thought he was a German pilot. They took him to a small cottage to wait for an army lorry, and that's when the sirens began to wail. It was the middle of the day. "Daylight raid," the postman said, grabbing his helmet. "They're not hitting the airfields anymore. They're after the towns." They pushed Hank into a small, damp public air raid shelter, the entrance covered by a sheet of corrugated iron. He was crammed in with 6 other people, 2 mothers, 3 children, and the old soldier from the home guard. For the next hour, Hank, the god of the sky, the hunter, became the hunted. He was helpless on the ground. He heard the distant, familiar drone of the Heinkels. But this time, he wasn't diving on them. He was under them. He heard the whistle of the bombs, a sound he had only ever heard from a distance. Here, it was a personal, terrifying scream. Whump, whump, whump. The ground shook. The children cried. One of the mothers, her face pale but calm, quietly sang a nursery rhyme. Hank just closed his eyes, his hands shaking. He wasn't just fighting for the sky. He was fighting for this damp, cold shelter, for the woman singing to her child, for the old man with the rifle. He wasn't fighting against the 109s. He was fighting for them. October 24th, 1940. RAF Biggin Hill. The army lorry dropped him at the front gate. He was covered in mud, his arm in a makeshift sling, and he limped across the tarmac. The ground crews, busy rearming other Spitfires, just stared. He saw Charlie, standing by the empty patch of grass where Hank's plane should have been, talking to squadron leader Davies. Davies was shaking his head, and Charlie was just staring at the ground, his shoulders slumped. "Charlie," Hank called out, his voice hoarse. Charlie looked up. His eyes widened, not with anger, but with a sudden, sharp relief that shocked Hank. He walked over, his pace quickening. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't say anything. He just looked at Hank's sling, his muddy uniform, and the new look in his eyes. "So," Charlie said, his voice gruff, "you're a mess." "Had a bit of a tumble," Hank replied. "Learn anything?" Hank looked over at the Spitfires, then back at Charlie. "Yeah, I did." "You were right." "I'm always right," Charlie grunted, but a small smile touched his lips. "Get to the infirmary. You've got a new plane waiting. And Hank, try not to break this one." November 15th, 1940. The battle was all but over, though they didn't know it. The Luftwaffe, battered and beaten, was throwing one last, desperate, large-scale assault at London, a final attempt to break the city's will before winter set in. Hank's leg was healed, but his mind was different. The rage was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. He wasn't flying for kills anymore. He was flying for the people in the shelters. The alarm rang, and the sky filled with the largest formation they had seen in weeks. "This is it, lads." Davies' voice cracked. "Hold the line. For London." Hank and Charlie climbed into the sky, side by side. The dogfight that followed was the most brutal of the war. But Hank was a new man. He didn't break formation. He protected his wingman. He saw a Bf-109 locking onto a new pilot, and instead of chasing his own target, he broke off and forced the German to disengage. He and Charlie found themselves in a ballet of teamwork, wordlessly covering each other's six, weaving and cutting through the bomber formations. They were a single, two-planed weapon. "Hank, On your left. 2 of them, Charlie yelled. Hank broke hard left, pulling 1109 into Charlie's sights, while he reversed and came down on top of the other. 2 quick bursts, 2 black plumes of smoke. The sky was littered with the wreckage of the Luftwaffe. The assault had been repulsed, their losses catastrophic. The remaining bombers jettisoned their payloads over the channel and ran for home. As the sun set, 2 Spitfires, their wings peppered with holes, landed on the darkening airfield. Hank and Charlie climbed out, bruised and utterly exhausted. The ground crew ran up, cheering. They walked away from the crowd, to the edge of the tarmac, and lit cigarettes. They watched the red glow of the fires in distant London, but the all-clear siren was already sounding. Reckon those old blokes in the Home Guard can stand down for a bit, Hank said quietly, his voice thick with fatigue. Charlie took a long drag, the cherry of his cigarette illuminating the deep lines on his face. He managed a small, tired smile and clapped Hank on his good shoulder. For now, lad. For now. They finished their cigarettes in a shared, heavy silence. The distant wail of the all-clear siren drifting across the fields. The walk back to the debriefing room was a slow march, each man's boots feeling like lead on the tarmac. Inside, the room was thick with smoke, the air heavy with the smell of sweat, oil, and fear. Squadron leader Davies was at the main operations board, his back to them. He was staring at the tally. 10 pilots from their wing were listed as missing. Beside that, a staggering number of enemy aircraft were marked as destroyed. Davies finally turned. His eyes were bloodshot, his face a mask of profound exhaustion. He didn't smile. He just looked at Hank, then at Charlie, and gave a single, slow nod. You held, he said, his voice thick with emotion. God help us all, you held. The line is held. In the days that followed, the war changed. The frantic daily, life or death scramble came to an end. The first biting winds of winter began to sweep across the airfield, bringing with them rain and low, heavy clouds. The scramble bell, which had been the frantic heartbeat of their lives for 4 months, fell silent. And the silence was terrifying. It was a nervous, aching quiet. The pilots, so long wound tight for battle, now found themselves listless. They gathered in the mess hall, their hands shaking so much they could barely hold their cups of tea. They had been built for the sprint, and now they had to face the marathon. The tension that had held them together was gone, leaving only the ghosts. Hank found Charlie standing by a new Spitfire, a gleaming Mark Deluxe just delivered from the factory. A ground crewman was already painting the squadron's identification letters on its fuselage. They're moving us, Charlie said, not looking up. He ran a gloved hand over the smooth, unblemished metal of the wing. The big daylight fights. They're done. Hitler's not coming. Not this year anyway. So, what now? Hank asked. He felt strangely empty. The purpose that had driven him, first the rage, then the need to protect, was suddenly without an immediate target. Now, Charlie said, finally turning to face him. His eyes were clear. The real war begins. They're splitting up the veterans. Some of us will go to train the new lads coming over from Canada and America. The rest, we go on the offensive. Fighters sweeps over France. Take the fight to them for a change. Charlie looked up. High above them, so high it was just a silver speck. A lone German reconnaissance plane drew a single white contrail across the cold, blue sky. He's taking pictures, Hank noted, his old instincts kicking in. Let him, Charlie said, a grim smile touching his lips. It's good they see we're still here. He clapped Hank on the shoulder, the gesture solid, real. The battle's over, Hank. But the war is a long, long way from done. Come on, they're teaching us how to fly at night. Hank nodded. He looked up at the white scar in the sky, then at the rows of repaired Spitfires, their engines silent. He was no longer the raw, desperate boy fighting for survival. He was a veteran, a survivor, with a new, colder, and longer job to do. He turned away from the sky and followed Charlie into the fading light